So today I'm going to give the overview of Indian polity. Okay, very interesting subject, very interesting, and every citizen of India should know about Indian polity, irrespective of what background they're studying, whether they're studying engineering, whether they passed out from engineering, I mean technical courses or art courses, okay, commerce background. Everyone should know what is the law of our country, okay, what is the basic Indian polity, because our constitution makers have taken utmost efforts to give one of the best constitution. There may be some criticism, as I will tell ahead also, but they have made one of the best Indian constitution, comparing with all constitutions and taking from all sources of constitution in the world. Now, so polity is a very important subject. So before that, I would like to tell you that Reflections IAS Academy is one of the unique institutions in Hyderabad, okay, where there is a unique program called as IAS Super 90, and our director sir, Dr. Vivekananda sir, he himself is an achiever in the 2014 year, and he has an aim to create 100 IAS officers and 100 IPS officers by the year 2030, which is quite a remarkable dream, which is really inspiring. So all of you are very blessed actually. So IAS Super 90 is one such program where individual attention is given, the mentorship is given to the students over here. I think already in this particular thing, you would have seen about some subjects where the overview of some subjects were given. Now, polity, I'll be going with a very basic medium, sir. Chala basic ga veltanu. I'll go very basic medium. Okay, so what is the polity actually? Why do we require a constitution? What is this Indian polity? Why do we require a constitution? What is a constitution? Basically, it is a set of rules by which governance is done. Why do you require a polity? Let's take a comparison. Let's say we take a building, sir. You all stay in an apartment or in villages. So basically, suppose if there is an apartment of, let us say, 100 residents, the apartment would have an association, they would have a committee, they would have a society. Okay, so society unnappudu gaani, committee unnappudu gaani, edaina gaani, whatever it is, whenever we have a society or a committee, okay, so what happens with a society or a committee? Basically, you would be electing a president, you would be electing a secretary, you will be having a treasurer, yes or no? So what is this thing? Basically, you need some people which are chosen by people to do a particular task, and they are bound by some rules. Even our society is run by what? Bylaws, yes or no? Now, there are many a times you'll be hearing in newspapers that Prime Minister is the most powerful man in our country, or judiciary is the most powerful body in our country. So it is nothing like that. It is basically, India is a democratic country. Democratic country is basically all the power is concentrated in the hands of the citizens of our country. So that is the beauty about Indian polity, and that is the beauty about Indian democracy. Recently, you would have also seen the elections conducted for 18th Lok Sabha, which is commencing from 2024. And again, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was elected as the Prime Minister for the third term actually. So basically, this is Indian democracy is a vibrant democracy. Such a large number of people voted. Okay, so it's a beauty of Indian democracy that elections are conducted so fairly. And the most important thing is that generally our constitution talks about what? Basic structure of constitution. Now, free and fair elections is such a wonderful thing. You would have seen in many countries like our neighboring country, our Pakistan, where the elected government or elected prime minister doesn't even stay as a prime minister for 5 years. But okay, so I was talking about that. Just like you understand a very basic, just compare with your apartment society, or in village there would be a society or a cooperative society, and compare it with the government. Now, people elect their representatives so that that particular person, whether he is the president of the society or the prime minister of the country, to govern the society or govern the country on behalf of the people only. So, you should understand that whenever no one is powerful, whether it is Prime Minister Narendra Modi, or whether it is Chief Justice of India, or executive, or IAS or IPS officer, basically Indian constitution is all about what? distribution of powers. Basically, what do you have in Indian polity? What are the three basic organs that you have? One is legislature. Then you have executive. Then you have judiciary. Now, always there is a question. Always there is a question as to which is the most powerful organ among these three. As I told you, it is based on distribution of powers. Distribution of powers. Now, when you compare this with, basically I'll compare three constitutions here. The first one is Indian Constitution. Next one is American Constitution. American Constitution. And finally, Britain Constitution. I'll compare with these three. Now, very important thing is that legislature, whether it is the parliament or the state assembly, parliament, who makes the laws? Lok Sabha generally, and the Rajya Sabha also. Lok Sabha is the house of the people, yes or no? Rajya Sabha is the council of states. So, legislature is the body which makes laws. Executive is the one which implements it. Executive may be the ministry or the bureaucrats. As you know, all the IAS, IPS officers are the part of permanent executive. They are here for still the 60 years they retire. And then you have judiciary, which oversees whether legislature and executive are performing their duties properly, and they observe it. They observe it. So they see the duties of legislature and executive. And whenever there is a possibility of violation of fundamental rights, or when something is not framed properly, then judiciary comes into picture. And sometimes there is a concept also called as judiciary overreach also, where judiciary takes more course than what is required. Okay. So now, if you compare with Indian Constitution, in Indian Constitution, it is a blend of Parliament. I'm talking about Indian Constitution, sir. Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution is a blend of parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. Parliament sovereignty and judicial supremacy. It is a blend of these two, sir. Again, if you compare it with the British Constitution is all about parliamentary sovereignty, sir, where Parliament is the most powerful organ over there. When you come to American Constitution, judiciary is the most supreme organ over there. But India beautifully designed it in such a way that in India, no organ is powerful over another. It is basically distribution of powers between legislature, executive and judiciary. Okay. So in India, no organ is powerful. Legislature means who makes laws, our MPs and MLAs. Executive is the body which implements all the policies made by the government. And judiciary is the one, you're talking about the courts, Supreme Court, High Court, District Courts, all these things which see that the law is properly implemented or there is no violation of the Constitution. Because who is the guardian of our Constitution? It is the Supreme Court, which is the guardian of our Constitution. So our Constitution is a very beautifully designed Constitution. If you see let's next see let's say the salient features of Constitution. Now, before I start with salient features of Constitution, let us know something about historical background on which our Constitution was made. Now, if you see the modern Indian history, this is a topic which is covered in modern Indian history also. That is the historical background. It all started in 1600, where Europeans adventured into India and they wanted to make a trade deal with Indians. So, in 1765, East India Company, if they started from the 18th century, the East India Company wanted to, basically they started as a trading company, but they became very powerful and they created their own acts, Regulating Act 1773, Pitt's India Act 1784, then you had Charter Act 1793. For every 20 years, they had a Charter Act 1793, Charter Act 1793, Charter Act 1833, Charter Act 1833, Charter Act again 1853. And what happened was, during this time, there was lot of resentment about this East India Company rule. And there was a famous revolt which is known as the first struggle of our independence also, which is known as Revolt of 1857. Then after Revolt of 1857, the British government, which is in the Great Britain, realized that this East India Company their rule has to end, and it was taken up by the Crown of British itself. Then they got many regulations like Government of India Act 1858, okay, Indian Councils Act 1861, Indian Councils Act 1892, Indian Council Act 1909, again Indian Government of India Act 1919, then Government of India Act 1935. When I say this Government of India Act 1935 displayed an instrumental role in framing Indian Constitution, Now today you are basically seeing what the UPSC, State Public Service Commission. This was borrowed from the Government of India Act 1935. And finally, we had Indian Independence Act 1947, where British granted independence and they left our country. So, Government of India Act 1935 is a very bulky source. And one salient feature of Indian Constitution is basically, it is the longest written constitution. It is what, sir? It is the lengthiest written constitution. Okay? It is the lengthiest written constitution because Government of India Act 1935 was a very bulky document. And another salient feature of Indian Constitution was, the second salient feature is that it is taken from different sources. Now, what are those different sources? For example, from Russian Constitution, we took fundamental duties. From Ireland Constitution, we took directive principles of state policy. From American Constitution, we took fundamental rights. From Australian Constitution, we took joint sitting of Parliament. From South African Constitution, we took how to amend the Constitution, amendment of Constitution procedure, and also election of Rajya Sabha. So from Japan, we took procedure established by law. From Germans, Weimar Constitution, we took what? Emergency provisions, which I am going to cover what is in our Constitution. So if you take all this into consideration, the second thing is, it is taken from different sources. And the third one is, our Indian Constitution is a blend of rigidity and flexibility. Our Indian Constitution is a blend of rigidity and flexibility. Now, when we talk about rigidity, rigid means what? Which is something which cannot be changed. It is very rigid. Flexible is it can be easily amended or changed. Now, if you take that example, the best example of rigid constitution, can anyone tell me? Like, what is the best example of rigid constitution? It is USA. Best example of rigid constitution is USA. And For flexible constitution, it is Britain. Now, when I talk about Britain, where Parliament is more sovereign, it's an unwritten constitution. American is a written constitution, but British is an unwritten constitution. Now, our India is a blend of rigidity and flexibility. For example, some of the provisions in our constitution cannot be changed, whereas some provisions can be easily changed. When I talk about this rigidity, this is called also as basic structure of constitution. And very important, another part of Indian polity is what we have to focus on is the Supreme Court judgments. Because Supreme Court judgments have been instrumental in paving a way of our understanding of our constitution. Now, this word, basic structure of constitution, is not written anywhere in the polity. It is not written anywhere, sir. But this was quoted by the Supreme Court in one of the judgments, which is a very famous judgment called as Keshavananda Bharati case in 1973, which said that it is talking about the amendment of fundamental rights. He said fundamental rights also can be amended provided they do not violate the basic structure of constitution. For example, what do you mean by basic structure of Indian constitution? What do you mean by basic structure of Indian constitution? I'll take secular. Ours is a secular country. Free and fair elections. Free and fair elections. Welfare state. Welfare state. Republic. Independence of judiciary. And you have judicial review. So if you see, many more are there. These are some basic examples. Free and fair elections is a basic structure of Indian constitution. Independence of judiciary, because independence of judiciary is utmost important in a democratic country. Similarly, judicial review. Okay, whenever government frames a law or even Supreme Court may give some judgment, they can go back and review their own judgment also. It is not that Supreme Court, once they have declared that this is the judgment we are giving, that's not permanent. They can still reopen the case and they can still give a judicial review. Okay, so it is also called as curative petition also. Now, in the same way, these are the basic structure of Indian constitution. So these are rigid, this which cannot be changed. Whoever the government comes, whomsoever it may be, it cannot be changed. But whereas in Britain constitution, it is what? Flexible. Anything can be amended, anything can be written. They will just write in the book. It's an unwritten constitution because they believed that they were very civilized and they started doing that. Now, the next part is, next what we have is parliamentary form of government. Next salient feature is what? Parliamentary form of government. Our India follows a parliamentary form of government, unlike the American presidential form of government. And then we have our India, as I told you, is a blend of parliament sovereignty and judicial supremacy. That is another feature. Then our India has integrated and independent judiciary. Our India has got what, sir? Integrated and independent judiciary. See, in American constitution, what happens is state laws are dealt by their state courts. I mean, courts which are the federal court, which are in the state. Now, whereas in case of central laws in America are dealt by federal court. So in India, we have an independent and integrated judiciary also. Because in India, whether it is a central law or a state law, the ultimate power of the judiciary lies in the Supreme Court. Whatever Supreme Court says is the final authority. Whereas in USA, state laws are taken care by state courts and the central laws are taken care by federal courts. That is another one. Another important feature of Indian Constitution is single citizenship. Okay. Suppose you are residing in Telangana, you are a citizen of India, whether you reside in Telangana or Karnataka or Tamil Nadu, or whether in Bihar or UP or Delhi, Gujarat, wherever it is, you are having a single citizenship. You are just an Indian citizen. Unlike in USA Constitution, where you have dual citizenship, you are a citizen of USA and also you are a citizen of California, you may be citizen of Texas. So this is the basic difference. And then most important part again is fundamental rights. Now in our country, fundamental rights, no constitution in the world has given such extensive case of fundamental rights. Okay, fundamental rights is a third part of constitution, which is from article 12 to article 35. Our fundamental rights are so exclusive. Now basically fundamental rights are known by another name, which is also called as political rights. Political rights. And another salient feature of Indian Constitution is what? Directive principles of state policy. DPSPs, Directive Principle of State Policy. This is taken from Ireland Constitution, as I told you earlier. Directive Principles of State Policy are like instrument of instructions to government. It is like a manual to the governments as to how to function and what policies to implement. As I said before, when I was talking about basic structure of Indian Constitution, I said welfare state. When I talk about welfare state, it is that basically the constitution makers had an idea that country's development does not mean that if some people get rich and if some people have more per capita income, that doesn't mean that country is developed. Country has to, the government of India has to take care of welfare of every section of people. There should be some welfare schemes implemented. For example, I would say, what is that? Distribution of income. Another one is what? Protecting the management of industries, organization of village panchayats. In DPSPs also basically you have three types of principles. One is liberal and intellectual principle. Another one is social principle. A third one is Gandhian principles. Management of industries, forming unions and all. Okay. Forming cooperative societies. It's a Gandhian thing. Organization of village panchayats. When you talk about liberal and intellectual principles, it is uniform civil code. Irrespective of whatever religion we have, everyone should be following the same law. And then you have separation of judiciary from executive, promotion of international peace and cooperation. All these things are liberal and intellectual principles, sir. Yes or no? So, and then you have social principles. Social principles is like uplifting of the weaker section of people, for example, SC/ST, and also ensuring that every child gets free and basic and compulsory education from the age of 6 to 14. Okay. So all these things come under directive principles of state policy. This is another important feature. Fundamental duties. When we are getting some rights, we need fundamental duties also. When I asked you why we basically wanted a constitution, I said one thing. Now you are giving fundamental rights to people. Everyone will act in their own way. Government has given me fundamental rights. I can do whatever I want. Fundamental rights are not absolute, sir. There are some limitations over it also. I'll just discuss it once we get into the structure of the constitution also. That is why there are some duties for us also. For example, to promote brotherhood is duty. We should take care of our citizens like they are our own brothers. Every citizen, irrespective of caste, creed, religion, or whatever it is. Similarly, protection of wildlife and monuments. This is also a fundamental duty. Okay. So we should promote harmony among the citizens. These all come under fundamental duties. Another one, secular state. Indian constitution does not state that this particular religion is the religion of our country. No. Every religion has got their own right. Every religion has got its own rights. Okay, you can happily live peacefully in India. That's a best example. That is the best part of our Indian constitution, where every religion can practice without any problems. Yeah. Another one is what? As I said, single citizenship is covered. Then we have independent bodies to see how well the government is functioning and to keep it from the purview of outside the political view. There are some independent bodies. What are those independent bodies? Election Commission of India. That's an independent body. Okay. Then we have UPSC, Union Public Service Commission. Then we have State Public Service Commission. Okay. Then we have what? National Commission for Scheduled Castes, National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, National Commission for Backward Classes. Okay. Special Linguistic Officer for Minorities, Special Officer for Linguistic Minorities. We have some independent bodies. Okay. So again, we have non-constitutional bodies also, like National Human Rights Commission, State Human Rights Commission. That means we have wide range of non-constitutional and constitutional bodies also. Okay. As I discussed earlier on, when fundamental rights is political rights, directive principles of state policy is economic and social rights. One basic fundamental difference between fundamental rights, as I said, political rights, economic and social rights. One basic difference between the fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy is that fundamental rights, if they are breached or if they are taken away from you by the government of India or the state government, you can approach courts. But for not implementing directive principles of state policy, you cannot approach a court and say you have to enforce it. No, court does not have any right to say that government has to do it, because see, why DPSPs were not enforceable in the court of law is there was a logic. Because India was a huge country, India is having a huge population. So it is not possible, it may not be possible for the Indian government or the state governments to have such requisite funds. Because if you see, all the welfare programs need funds. That also contributes to the fiscal burden of Indian government. The fiscal deficit keeps rising. That's why there's a criticism of freebies also. You know, freebies. Government gives pension to unemployed youth or old people or a particular section of people, or every section of people also. There will be some freebies given. So that puts burden, economic burden, rather fiscal burden on government of India. So these things are also very important we need to understand that. Okay. So this is the basic thing. So you can demand for political rights, you can go to courts, but you cannot go for economic and social rights, which is directive principles of state policy. And fundamental duties also, it is important that we should respect our national flag and national anthem. Okay. Such things are there in fundamental duties. But even fundamental duties also, there are some acts. You cannot disrespect national anthem of our country, or you cannot disrespect national anthem of our country or national flag of the country for that matter. There is a law for that also. So some fundamental duties are also, you have to follow it so that we follow some duties, because we are getting some rights. We all should have that Indian feeling. Okay. And we should be doing some fundamental duties. So then another thing is, we have emergency provisions. This is a very unique feature of Indian Constitution. What is that? Emergency provisions. Now, emergency provisions, what are these? You have national emergency, Article 352 to Article 360 talks about it. It is the 18th part of Indian Constitution. I'll talk about the parts after this. In emergency, you have national emergency, where our president, after taking the decision, after taking the advice of Council of Ministers, can impose a national emergency based on some conditions. What are those? When there's a war-like situation, or there's an armed rebellion inside the country itself. And then you have president rules, which is also known as state emergency, where if the state, if the state fails to comply with the directions of the center, or the machinery, the constitutional machinery of the state breaks down. And then you have Article 360, which is financial emergency, which has never been imposed in India. Whereas Article 352 was imposed for Article 356, present rule has been extensively imposed. That's why there was a case called as SR Bommai case, 1994, which talked about what should be the provisions so that central government does not misuse the power of state emergency, which is also called as president rule. Extensively it is being used. It is being used as a political tool rather, to take vengeance on some particular political parties, also to take vengeance on opposition. Okay, so this is one thing. And then we have three-tier government. No, this is a very important feature of Indian Constitution, sir. Three-tier government. What do you mean by three-tier government? Central government, state government, local government. Central government, state government, and third is what? Local government. 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act 1991, 74th Constitutional Amendment Act 1992 got this three-tier government. What is the three-tier government, sir? Panchayati Raj in villages and municipalities in cities. Okay, this is another beautiful feature of Indian Constitution. Then formation of cooperative societies, that was done by 97th Constitutional Amendment Act 2011. That is another beautiful feature of Indian Constitution. Yes. So these are some of the features of Indian Constitution. And there is some criticism also. Many people criticize that our Constitution is too lengthy and it is borrowed Constitution. And second thing they said is this is very un-Indian Constitution, which does not have any Indian elements in it, Indian tradition elements. Some of the constitution makers said, some of the lawmakers said it is an un-Gandhian Constitution. Okay. Then also they said this is also a paradise of lawyers. Lawyers can play, they can play football with this Constitution. But despite of all this criticism, one thing our constitution makers took, yes or no, you know that our constitution makers took 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. Their sweat, blood and soul were put into the making of the Indian Constitution. They made it very, they made it with utmost meticulous. It was a very meticulous task and they made it very meticulously also. So that is the thing. Now next we will see very important part, sir. Structure of Constitution. Structure of Constitution. Our structure of Constitution. Our Constitution has, basically, our Constitution has, what, sir? Our Constitution has 395 articles, which comprises, 22 parts of Indian Constitution contains 395 articles, and we have 12 schedules as on date. Now, when you talk about 22 parts, okay, Article 1 to 4, Article 1 to 4, Article 1 to 4 talks about what, sir? It talks about the Union of India. Article 1 to 4 talks about Union and territories. This is part 1, sir. This is part 1 of Indian Constitution. And part 2, this comprises from Article 5 to 11, which talks about citizenship. Then you have part 3, which this is from Article 12 to Article 35, which is the most important. It is also called as Magna Carta. Article 12 to 35. And if you see fundamental rights, Article 12 talks about definition of state. Article 13 talks about judicial review indirectly. Article 14 talks about right to equality before law, Article 15 talks about what? we should not discriminate people based on their caste, creed, religion, place of birth and their gender. And Article 16 talks about right to equality in public employment. Article 17 talks about what? Abolition of untouchability. Article 18 talks about what? Abolition of titles like sir. Title was given in the British times, British era. Article 19 talks about right to freedom of expression. Okay, right to freedom. So, Article 21, right to life, very important article, sir. Right, Article 21 is it's like the most important article of Indian Constitution. Right to life. Okay, right to life is very, very important article. It has got a wide ramifications. This has got wide ramifications. Recently in Civil Services Examination of 2024 also, preliminary exam, this was asked. Right to privacy comes under which article? Ambit of which article? Article 21. Now earlier, this is a very important thing, sir, I would like to discuss. Article 21 says that right to life under procedure established by law. Procedure established by law means whether the law is fair or transparent, it does not matter, but the law has to be followed. That's it. That means your life can be taken by procedure established by law, irrespective of whether the law is fair or transparent. But Supreme Court said in 1976, this is not the case. In Menaka Gandhi versus Union of India case, 1976, it said, this procedure established by law is taken from Japan, it is followed in Britain also. But it said in US, there is a process called as due process of law. In due process of law, it is checked whether the law is fair and transparent also. So same applies in India also. Though the words mentioned as procedure established by law, we also follow what? Due process of law. That is why I said guardian of the Constitution, and who the interpreter of Constitution is whom, sir? Who interprets our Constitution? It is basically the Supreme Court, the judiciary. So that is why this is a very important article, sir. Another important article is what? Article 22 talks of, Article 23, which talks about right against exploitation. Article 25 to 28 talks about what, sir? It talks about right to freedom of religion. Article 29 and Article 30 talks about cultural and educational rights of minorities. Article 32, very important. This is known as the right to constitutional remedies. It is known as the heart and soul of Indian Constitution, where Supreme Court, if the rights are violated, if the fundamental rights of the people are violated, they can issue writs like, mandamus, habeas corpus, prohibition. Totally five writs are there. That anyways, we're going to discuss when we come deep into that. We have we're running short of time here. Polity is such an extensive and such an interesting subject. Now then also we'll be talking about what, sir? We'll be talking about what? Yes. So now the next part is DPSP's Directive Principles of State Policy. Now part 4 of our Indian Constitution talks about Directive Principles of State Policy. This is part 4 of our Indian Constitution, Article 36 to 51. And then you have part 4A, which is Article 51A, which talks about fundamental duties. And then you have part 5, which is Union, Executive and Legislature. This is Article 52 to Article 151. Then you have part 6, which talks about states. Same, state executive and state legislature, which is from Article 152 to Article 237. Next, Part 7. Part 7, it is no longer in existence, which is also known by, it is repealed. It talked about 7th Constitution Amendment Act 1956. Now, why I am talking about all these parts is recently there was a question asked in UPSC in 2024, very basic question. They said, Part 9A of the Constitution talks about municipalities. I'm going to talk there about now. Part 18 of the Constitution talks about emergency provisions, correct? Part 20 of the Indian Constitution talks about amendment of Constitution. Yes, all those three are true. So, this is Part 7. Part 8 talks about Union territories, okay? And Part 9 talks about what, sir? It talks about Panchayati Raj, okay? Part 9A talks about municipalities, okay? Part 9B talks about what, sir? Cooperative societies. Part 10, which is comprising from Article 244 to 244A, talks about scheduled and tribal areas. And Part 11, which is from Article 240, which is from Article 245 to Article 263, talks about relation between union and states. Part 12 talks about finance, property, contracts and suits, which is from Article 264 to Article 300A. Article 3, the next part 13, Article 301 to 307 talks about what? Trade, commerce and intercourse within the territory of India. Then we have Part 14 that talks about Union Public Service Commission and State Public Service Commission, which is from Article 308 to Article 323. Now, then Part 14A talks about tribunals, which is Article 323A to 323B. Then Part 15 talks about what, sir? Elections, which is from Article 324 to 324A. Then is a Part 16 of the Constitution, which is talking about special provisions relating to certain classes. This is from Article 332 to Article 342. Then Part 17 talks about official languages, that also comes under what? 8th Schedule of Indian Constitution, Article 343 to Article 351. Next is Part 18 of Indian Constitution, which talks about what? Emergency provisions from Article 352 to Article 360. And Part 19 is miscellaneous, which is from Article 361 to Article 367. And then the 20th part of Indian Constitution, which talks about what, sir? Amendment of Constitution, Article 368. Article 368 talks about amendment of Constitution. Basically, our Constitution can be amended in 3 ways, sir. One is with simple majority. For example, Schedule 1, Schedule 4 talks about what? Rajya Sabha seats. Then the distribution that can be amended by simple majority. Then you have what? Another is special majority. Okay, which is 2/3 of 2/3 of majority. That is for fundamental rights and DPSPs. So it is little bit rigid. It's not very easy. And there is some other part of another part of Constitution. For example, if you want to change the method of election of president, if you want to take a decision about GST, taxation laws, whichever is related with federal. Okay. One more important feature which I forgot to mention is our Indian Constitution is, though federal, it is federal, but there is strong tendency towards center. That means more unitary and less federal. It has got strong tendency towards the center. Okay, that is another feature. So, whichever is the federal feature, it requires special majority in the parliament of both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha and consent of half of the number of Indian states. That means ratification of states. This is the way our constitution can be amended. Now, so 21 talks about temporary transitional provisions, and part 22 talks about commencements and all. So that is not very important, but these are very important things. And of course, you have 12 schedules in Indian Constitution. Notably, 4th schedule talks about what? Rajya Sabha. Schedule 1 talks about the Union of India and its territories. And Schedule 7 talks about distribution of power between center and states. What all powers come under central government, what all powers come under state government, and what all are concurrent lists where both center and states can take action. Examples of it is, for example, union list has now 98 subjects and states has got 59 and concurrent has got, I think, around 47. Okay. So union list, what do you have in that? Defense, finance, okay, external affairs, banking, insurance, all come under central government's purview. And for example, state list, law and order, policing, okay, taxes on land, etc. And concurrent list, forests, weights, marriage and divorce also. These come under concurrent list. Okay. Again, part 8, as I told you, this also came in the examination. What recently in UPSC, what all languages were added. It talks about the languages recognized by the Constitution of India. Earlier there were 14. Now it has become 22 in number. Now it has become what? 22 in number. There was a question in UPSC also. 71 Constitution of Amendment Act 1992. How many languages were added? It was clearly there in that question was given in the UPSC examination. And then we have 9th schedule, which talks about the Article 31 thing. Article 31 was a right to property, was earlier a fundamental right, but it was subsequently abolished as a fundamental right, but it is now a legal right under Article 300A. So all provisions related to repealment of Zamindari laws and everything, that is a very big schedule again. 10th schedule talks about what? Anti-defection law. And 11th schedule talks about what? Panchayati Raj. And 12th schedule talks about municipalities. These were added by 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act 1991 and 74th Constitutional Amendment 1992. Sorry. Okay. So this totally how much is there in our how many articles are there when the Constitution was framed? 395 articles. It had 22 parts and 12 schedules, which were very important. Okay. If you see all these things, the polity is such a beautiful subject that there is checks and balances in everything. Okay. As I said, no one is powerful in Indian Constitution. If I will ask you, only 2 things are powerful in India. One is people. They elect their leaders. They run the business. They run the show. Second one is what? Tell me. It is not even judiciary which is powerful, but constitution which is powerful. Everyone has to follow the constitutionally. Recently, when our Prime Minister Narendra Modi became again the 3rd time the Prime Minister, he is sworn in for the he was touching the constitution. वो नमस्कार कर रहे थे constitution को. So that is the power of constitution. Constitution is the ultimate in our country, along with democracy, which is what? Who told that democracy is there in India? Constitution itself. So that you have to understand. Very, very important part where it talks about Indian Constitution. If you see, Indian Constitution is so well adjusted. It talks about what? It talks about what is the territory of India and what is the procedure for it, what is the procedure for amendment. It talks about citizenship. Citizenship, only Parliament can make laws on it. Then fundamental rights. Okay. Fundamental rights gives protection to some weaker section of people also. As I said, reservation system, which is also called as what? Positive discrimination. Yes or no? So again talks, that is political rights, fundamental rights. Directive principles of state policies are like instrument of instructions. What are those? It is like instrument of instructions given to the government as to how to function. Okay. So these are the things. Then we have fundamental duties. Then we have union. In union also we'll talk about what? We'll talk some important articles of the president. Now if you ask me, is president powerful in India? Yes, of course, all the executive actions are taken in his name. But president, except some discretions, always has to follow the aid and advice of Council of Ministers. So Prime Minister, Council of Ministers head, who is the head of Council of Ministers? It is the Prime Minister. So these things are there. Okay. And then it talks about what? Supreme Court and their jurisdiction, how powerful they are and all. Then CAG, it is basically like a financial scrutiny body where they check all the, audit the accounts of government offices and government, what government is doing. Okay. And then states similarly, in states where governor again is the executive. Okay. And governor also has to follow the aid and advice of Council of Ministers. Who is headed there? Chief Minister. Then it talks about what? Union territories. Then it talks about Panchayati Raj. Then it talks about municipalities, cooperative societies. Yes or no? Then it talks about what? It talks about relation between union and states, administratively, legal wise, legislature, and also the financial wise. So, then you have independent constitutional bodies like UPSC and SP, State Public Service Commission. And then you have Election Commission. Then you have special provisions for weaker sections of society. For example, National Commission of Scheduled Castes, National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. You have National Commission for what? Backward classes. Special provisions are given to them. Then it talks about Indian constitution is so great because India is a very diverse country. India is a very diverse country with lot of geographical elements, but still, that's why this Indian constitution made sure that no section of people are neglected. That's why even for linguistic minorities also, that's why there are 22 official languages officially are recognized by the Constitution of India. Yes or no? Okay, so that is the thing over here. Such a wonderful constitution. And then again, it talks about emergency provisions. See, because in a country like India, which has got a large geographical diversity for that matter, central government is supposed to have some power, sir. Okay? Otherwise, each state would be playing their own cards. So there are emergency provisions also. Suppose there's a war-like situation where the entire control needs to be taken by the central government. And again, for the best interest of the country, Article 356, suppose if the state is not following the instructions given by the central government, then it can proclaim president's rule. Article 360, financial emergency. And then most important, amendment of constitution. As I said, our constitution is a blend of rigidity and flexibility. Our constitution is a blend of rigidity and flexibility. So some provisions in our constitution cannot be amended that easily, as I told you. Fundamental rights and DPSPs. Okay. And some can be easily done by simple majority, flexible. For example, I told you, what was that? What was the thing I told you? It is like deciding the boundaries of the state. Okay. That's why division of states is very easy. It is all in the hands of central government. They have to, of course, they have to take the permission of the president before introducing that bill. But state legislators do not have power, sir. When Telangana was created, it was by central governments. It was a central government's initiative. State governments are asked for their opinion. They are given 6 months. But the central government may or may not accept those recommendations. That is in their hand. You get the point, sir. So if you see that's why this can be done by simple majority. You don't need special majority for that. And then again, to ensure that state governments also have their own autonomy and their own power, everything central government cannot interfere in that. That's why they made third way of amendment of constitution is what? Tell me, sir. What is that? It is you can amend the constitution by special majority, and you need consent of or ratification of at least half of the states in India, 15 states. Now we have 29. So that is there also. So this is the specialty about Indian constitution. So if you see Indian constitution, it is a very interesting thing, sir. Okay. Constitution is the most powerful thing. There may be few apprehensions today that Prime Minister Narendra Modi or Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister is the most powerful. No, sir. It is the constitution which is more powerful. Of course, judiciary is like the guardian, and they interpret the constitution, sir. That is the most important thing. Okay. And again, Parliament has also got they have also got their powers also. Parliament also. But they are not supreme. Neither legislature, neither executive, neither judiciary is powerful. It is a constitution which is more powerful. One of the best feature of Indian constitution is the fundamental rights, where weaker sections and everyone is protected in the society, in our country is protected. Okay. But one thing you must understand is that as a citizen of India, we must be responsible while exercising our fundamental rights. That's why fundamental rights are not absolute, sir. When you come to UPSC examination, as you can see, polity, Indian polity plays a very important role. Because if you see, around 20 questions this year were asked in UPSC. Generally, always 15 to 20 questions are asked in polity, sir, in UPSC examination. And in paper 2 also, Indian polity and governance and international relations, that is there in paper 2 also. Polity plays a very important role, and it is a very interesting subject. Okay. Now, I hope that you have understood the gist of what is there. We hardly had a 1 hour of session. So, this is like an overview rather. It's just an overview. Okay. And it is a very interesting subject, sir. You may come from any background, but if you ask any UPSC aspirant, he would say polity is one of his favorite subject. Polity is definitely one of the favorite subjects. That is the specialty of polity, sir. Okay. And as you know, with respect to books also, M. Lakshmikant is one good book. I mean, the best book in the market. It is known as Bhagavad Gita or Bible or Quran of the Indian Constitution book. Okay. And then you have, of course, NCERTs. If this year you see in the papers also, NCERTs are most important, sir. NCERT really explains the subject, whether it is polity or economy, science and technology or general science, or whether it is history, it is explained in a very lucid and a very easy manner, sir. So that is the most important thing about this. This talks about Indian Constitution. So that is the thing, sir. So I wish you all the best for your future endeavors, and I hope, you take the best opportunity of the coaching and you excel. And we would like to see you as a future IAS or IPS officer or any union public. You should be coming in any services. So I wish you all the best once again. Thank you.